role that I would like to play is an auditor who, as we know, can be real pains and really annoying. So if you just give them the information, you're finished with them and you're done. Social engineering works because people are scared of getting into trouble if they don't give this big important person who says he's the boss of a very important company you work with information. Maybe you might lose your job or you might get in trouble with your own boss. And finally, people don't like confrontations. So when I walk into a building, sometimes people look at me, they know I don't belong there, but there's not very many people who challenge me. Occasionally it happens, and I feed them some semi-plausible story about why I'm there, and that's fine, that's enough. I've got some social engineering friends who like to work by the yes rule. So if someone comes up to them in the organisation and says, "Hey, are you here to fix our computer systems?" They say, "Yes, I am." So social engineering attacks can be broadly broken down into 3 categories. Remote social engineering, so social engineering via email, phishing for example, social engineering over the fax, and it never ceases to amaze me how much people trust a fax machine. So they're suspicious of emails that come in, but if a fax comes in saying Sharon's come in to fix your computers, or Sharon's coming in to sell sandwiches or do a survey today, people believe it. Fax machines are excellent tools for social engineers. Then you've got, of course, social engineering over the telephone, often called pretexting. The Paris Hilton hack of a few years ago started with a few hacker social engineering types calling up a T-Mobile store in the States and saying, "Yeah, we're calling from your head office. We've noticed that you've had some network problems today." And let's face it, who doesn't have network problems? So the guy on the other end of the phone says, "Well, yeah, our network is running a bit slow." So the hackers go, "That's what we have in our report. We can help you with that." And they proceeded to get the URL for user administration of, in this case, Sidekick telephone users. And they got a valid username and password, logged on, found Paris Hilton's account details, and the rest is history. My favourite type of social engineering is on-site social engineering, what some people call extreme social engineering. So it's when you try and physically make your way into an office or a facility where you don't really belong, and it's the best fun social engineering. You go in, you're walking around an office where you're not supposed to be, you get a real adrenaline rush, it's really good fun. So that's fine from an ethical social engineer's point of view. From a malicious social engineer's point of view, the rewards are great. If you can get inside the building, if you can get inside a data center or a comms room, you have hit the jackpot. But it is easier to get caught. Finally, you've got the next generation real-world social engineering attacks. So that's when you leave some physical bait in the real world to try and entice people into plugging something into their computers or going to a link where they shouldn't go to download some malware, and inadvertently gives the social engineer access to information or resources that they shouldn't be able to access. So to give you an example, there was a traffic ticket incident in the States earlier this year. Some hackers went around to a car park and put traffic tickets on the cars. When the people came back, they got really worried. "Oh crap, I got a traffic ticket." So the ticket had a link to a URL where the people were supposed to go and recognize the pictures of their cars and pay their fines. So, there's not many people who would not fall for this. So they went to visit the site, they found the pictures of their cars, but also it asked them if they wanted to download an antivirus. So loads of them did and got totally owned. There's plenty of different types of social engineering attacks and different ways that people might conduct social engineering. So to give you a few examples of social engineering attacks that I've used myself or that I've read about in the press. Has anybody heard about a Mumble Attack? Mumble Attack is one of the cruelest attacks going. It's when the social engineer calls up a call centre and pretends to be calling on behalf of a customer who's speech impaired. And if the call center agent asks to speak directly to the customer who's speech impaired, the social engineer uses one of those voice distortion machines to impersonate the speech impaired customer. So the call center agent gets a little bit embarrassed, a little bit confused, drops their guards and reveals information that they may not do in other circumstances. And I know you're looking at me thinking, seriously, is this really an attack? Does this really work? It worked on Verizon a couple of years ago, where the social engineers were able to get thousands of cell phone records from Verizon using this very technique. Reverse social engineering has got 3 stages. First of all, the social engineer establishes himself as an authority with their mark in a certain area. So they may, for example, say, hey, this is, call up their mark, Alice, for example, say, hey, Alice, this is Bob. Listen, I'm calling from IT Help Desk, and we're doing some tests over the next few days or few weeks that may affect your network connectivity. So if you've got any problems, I'll give you my mobile number so you're able to contact me in emergency. The next step of a reverse social engineer is sabotage. The social engineer finds some way of creating a problem. So in this case, they find some way of disconnecting Alice from the network. So hopefully, Alice will ring John, will ring the social engineer and say, hey John, yeah, listen, the network has gone down, please can you help me? So the third stage of a reverse social engineer is when the target turns around to the social engineer and asks for help. And in giving help to their target, the social engineer somehow manages to get access to information. Road apples are when you leave some physical bait, like the traffic ticket incident I spoke about. There was quite a famous social engineer a couple of years ago where a pen test company scattered 20 or so USB keys around the car park outside an organisation, and I think something like 18 of the 20 USB keys were picked up by employees and plugged in when they got into the office. They called home and they were able to track how many of them were actually plugged in. It's a very effective attack. Phishing, I'm not even going to talk about, but you can see that it splits into remote versus on-site versus real world. A 10 attack. A 10 attack you've probably seen on the television. And a 10 attack is when you use a very attractive individual to distract security while the less attractive counterparts sneak past unnoticed. It looks a bit like this. I think so. This is what I would look like if I were a giant. So I figured if there's such a thing as a 10 attack, there must be such a thing as a minus 10 attack, where social engineers use their less attractive counterparts to distract security, while their more attractive counterparts walk past unnoticed. Looks a bit like this. So I had really good fun when I was taking these photos originally. I went up to the security guard in this building and I said, hey, do you know what social engineering is? What do you think the answer was? No? So I explained what social engineering was and that I would like to set up a couple of photos. And I think that was the real 10 attack, distracting this security guard for about 20 minutes while lots of people could have walked past unnoticed. So I'm calling that the 10 squared attack. So is social engineering really a problem? Or is it something that people like me just like to do to get their kicks? Well, maybe a little bit of both. But the problem with social engineering is that people who have been victims of social engineering often don't realise that they've been targeted. Social engineers are asking for a little bit of information each time, and they don't realise that that very nice lady on the phone just now was actually an evil social engineer. So to give you a couple of examples, I'll talk a bit more about the case in Antwerp. This Argentinian supposedly businessman, Carlos Hector Flomenboim, decided to open an account in ABN AMRO in Antwerp, where they look after and store lots and lots of diamonds. So this guy goes in over the course of a year, making friends with everybody who works in there. They loved him. He brought them in chocolates. The staff absolutely adored him. And some